Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never used to be afraid of rest stops. Growing up in Pennsylvania, my family would take these long road trips down to Florida every summer, and we'd stop at those big highway rest areas every few hours. You know the kind. The ones with the vending machines that never work right and the bathrooms that smell like industrial cleaner trying to mask something worse. They were just part of the journey. Boring, even. That changed 3 years ago on a drive from Pittsburgh to Charlotte. I was 24 at the time, making the trip alone for a job interview. It was late October, and I'd left later than I should have. By the time I crossed into West Virginia, it was past midnight, and the mountain roads were darker than anything I'd experienced before. No streetlights, no other cars. Just my headlights cutting through an endless tunnel of trees. Around 1 in the morning, I realized I desperately needed to use the bathroom. I'd been ignoring it for the last 30 miles, hoping I could make it to the next town, but there was nothing out there. Just forest and darkness and those winding roads that seemed to go on forever. When I finally saw the brown sign for a rest area, I actually felt relieved. The rest stop was small, not one of those big travel plazas with fast food and gift shops. Just a single building with bathrooms, a few picnic tables outside, and a parking lot that could maybe fit 20 cars. There were no other vehicles when I pulled in. The lot was completely empty except for my Honda sitting under one of those tall yellow lights that buzzed like it was full of dying insects. I grabbed my phone and got out. The air was cold, much colder than it had been when I'd stopped for gas an hour earlier. I could see my breath. The building was one of those brick structures that looked like it had been there since the 70s, with small windows and a flat roof. A single light was on inside, that same flickering fluorescent glow that all rest-stop bathrooms seem to have. The men's room was exactly what I expected. Cracked tiles, a smell that made me breathe through my mouth, graffiti scratched into the metal stall dividers. I did what I needed to do as quickly as possible. The whole time I could hear that buzzing sound from the lights overhead. It seemed louder than it should have been, like it was inside my head. When I came back outside, I noticed something that made me stop walking. There was a car in the parking lot now. I hadn't heard it pull in, hadn't heard an engine or tires on pavement or a door closing, but there it was, parked 3 spaces away from mine. An older model sedan, dark blue or black. It was hard to tell in that yellow light. The windows were tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. It was just another traveler, I told myself. Someone else who needed to stop. The fact that I hadn't heard them pull in didn't mean anything. I'd been in the bathroom with water running and those loud hand dryers going. I walked to my car, hit the unlock button, and got in. I locked the doors immediately. I'm not sure why, it was just instinct. That's when I noticed the person. Standing at the far edge of the parking lot, just beyond where the light reached, was a figure. A man, I thought, based on the height and build. He was completely still, facing my direction. I couldn't make out any features. He was just a dark silhouette against the even darker tree line. My heart started pounding. I turned the key in the ignition, and my headlights flashed on. For just a second, they swept across where the figure had been standing. There was no one there. I sat there, engine running, staring at that spot. Had I imagined it? Was I that tired? I looked at the clock on my dashboard. 1:17 in the morning. I'd been driving for almost 5 hours. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The sedan was still parked next to me. Still no one inside that I could see. Still no indication that anyone had gotten out. I put my car in reverse and backed out of the space. As I did, my headlights swept across the rest area building. That's when I saw him again. He was standing right next to the building now, pressed against the brick wall beside the women's bathroom entrance, standing completely motionless, watching my car. I could see him more clearly now in my headlights. He was wearing dark clothes, maybe a jacket and jeans. His face was pale, almost white in the harsh light. But it was his posture that scared me most. He wasn't trying to hide. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, arms at his sides, staring directly at me. I didn't wait to see anything else. I slammed my foot on the gas and peeled out of that parking lot faster than I'd ever driven. My tires actually squealed on the pavement. I got back on the highway going 20 miles over the speed limit, hands shaking on the wheel, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. No one followed me. The road behind me stayed dark and empty. But here's the thing that still bothers me, the thing that made me finally share this story. About 20 minutes after I left that rest stop, my phone buzzed with a notification, a text message from an unknown number. I was too scared to look at it while driving, so I waited until I reached a town and pulled into a well-lit gas station with other people around. The message had no words, just a photo. It was a picture of my car, taken from behind, sitting in that rest stop parking lot. The angle was from the tree line, from the exact spot where I'd first seen the figure standing. You could see me through my back window, just the back of my head, sitting in the driver's seat with the interior light on. The photo had been taken before I'd driven away, when I was still sitting there, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. I reported it to the police in the next town. They took a statement, wrote down the rest area location, took the phone number from the text. They told me they'd look into it. I never heard back. I've made that drive a dozen times since then for work. I never stop at that rest area anymore. I'll hold it for 50 miles if I have to. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving that stretch of highway, I'll see the brown sign for that rest stop appear in my headlights. And I think about that figure standing in the darkness. And I wonder how many times I've driven past places where someone was watching from the shadows, and I just didn't see them. I wonder how many photos of me exist that I don't know about. I've always been careful when I travel alone. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I've done enough solo road trips to know the rules. Don't pick up hitchhikers, lock your doors, trust your gut, stay aware of your surroundings. I thought I was doing everything right. This happened last spring when I was driving from Denver to Albuquerque to visit my sister. It's normally a 6-hour drive, give or take, depending on traffic and how many times you stop. I left around 3 in the afternoon, planning to get there by 9 or 10 at the latest. I'd done the drive before. I knew the route. Everything was fine until I got into northern New Mexico, somewhere between Raton and Springer. That's pretty remote country out there. High desert, rolling hills, not much in the way of towns. The sun was starting to set, turning the landscape orange and purple, and I remember thinking how beautiful it was. I'd been on the road for about 3 hours when I saw the sign for a rest area. My gas tank was still half full, but I needed to stretch my legs and use the bathroom. The sign said the rest area was 2 miles ahead. I put on my blinker even though there was no one else on the road. The rest stop was small and isolated. Just a building with bathrooms, a couple of covered picnic areas, and a big parking lot that was mostly empty. There was one other car there when I pulled in, a white pickup truck parked near the building. I didn't see anyone around it. I parked a few spaces away from the truck, grabbed my purse, and headed toward the bathrooms. The sun was lower now, and the air had that sharp, cold bite that desert evenings get. I remember wrapping my jacket tighter around me. The women's bathroom was clean enough, which surprised me. There were 3 stalls, and I took the one farthest from the door like I always do. While I was in there, I heard the main door open and close. Footsteps echoed on the tile. Another woman, I assumed, probably from the pickup truck. But then I heard something strange. The footsteps stopped right outside my stall door, not in front of the sinks or another stall, right outside mine. I could see the shadow of feet under the door. Work boots, maybe. Definitely not women's shoes. My stomach dropped. I held my breath and didn't move. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 seconds, the footsteps moved away. I heard a stall door open and close. Then silence. I finished as quietly as I could, pulled up my jeans, and slowly opened the stall door. The bathroom was empty. All the other stall doors were open, showing empty stalls. No one was at the sinks. I was alone. But I knew I'd heard someone. I knew I'd seen those boots. I washed my hands fast and got out of there. When I pushed through the bathroom door back into the evening air, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The white pickup truck was gone. There were no other cars in the parking lot. Just mine, sitting alone under the darkening sky. But I'd only been in the bathroom for maybe 3 minutes. I would have heard a truck start up and drive away. The engine noise would have echoed in that bathroom. And I hadn't heard anything except those footsteps. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. The parking lot was completely silent. No traffic on the highway. No birds. Nothing. Just the wind moving through the scrub brush beyond the rest area. I walked quickly to my car, keeping my keys ready between my fingers, the way my dad taught me. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there with my heart pounding. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Then I looked at the clock on my dashboard. It said 8:47 p.m. That couldn't be right. When I'd pulled into the rest area, it had been around 6:15. I checked my phone. Same thing. 8:47 p.m. I had 3 missed calls from my sister and 2 texts asking where I was and if I was okay. 2.5 hours had passed. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands starting to shake. There was no way I'd been in that bathroom for 2.5 hours. It had been 3 minutes, 5 tops. But my phone doesn't lie. My car clock doesn't lie. And it was fully dark now, the kind of deep darkness you only get in the middle of nowhere with no city lights for miles. I tried to remember walking from my car to the bathroom. I could picture it clearly. I remembered going inside, using the stall, hearing those footsteps, washing my hands, then walking back out. There was no gap in my memory, no missing piece, just those few minutes in the bathroom, and now somehow it was almost 9 at night. I started my car and got back on the highway, driving way faster than I should have. I called my sister, and she answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. She said she'd been calling me for over an hour. She'd even called Highway Patrol to see if there had been any accidents reported on my route. I told her I was fine, that I'd just stopped at a rest area, and my phone must have been on silent. I didn't tell her about the missing time. I didn't tell her about the footsteps or the disappearing truck. I knew how it would sound. I made it to her place by 10:30. When I got there and she saw my face, she asked if I was sure I was okay. I told her I was just tired from the drive, but I wasn't okay. I kept thinking about those 2.5 hours. I checked my recent apps on my phone, thinking maybe I'd been scrolling mindlessly and lost track of time. But the phone showed no activity during that period. It had just been sitting in my purse, locked. I checked my car's GPS history a few days later. According to the data, my car had been stationary at that rest area from 6:14 p.m. to 8:46 p.m., nearly 2.5 hours parked in the same spot. I have no memory of that time except for those few minutes in the bathroom. No one has ever been able to explain it to me. I've tried to rationalize it. Carbon monoxide exposure, maybe, though that doesn't explain the missing truck or the footsteps. A weird fugue state brought on by road fatigue. Some kind of psychological break. But here's what really scares me. About a week after I got back home to Denver, I was going through my purse looking for a receipt. I found a small piece of paper folded up in the inside pocket, a pocket I never use. I unfolded it. Written in handwriting that wasn't mine, in blue pen, were 5 words, "Don't come back here again." I don't remember anyone giving me that note. I don't remember putting it in my purse. Just like I don't remember what happened during those missing hours at that rest area in northern New Mexico. I've driven past that exit twice since then, on trips to visit my sister. Both times I've kept my speed up and my eyes forward. I don't look at the rest area sign when it appears. I don't even want to think about what might be waiting there. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I think about those footsteps outside my stall door. I think about that white pickup truck that vanished without a sound, and I wonder what I did during those missing hours that I can't remember. I wonder if some part of me knows what happened, buried deep where I can't reach it, and I wonder if that's better than remembering. I worked night security at a rest stop in Nebraska for about 8 months. It was the kind of job you take when you need money and you're not picky about how you get it. The pay was okay, the hours were terrible, and the work was mostly boring. Mostly. The rest area was on I-80, one of the bigger ones with a travel plaza, restaurants, and a separate building for truckers. My shift was midnight to 8 in the morning. My job was to do walking patrols every hour, check that the bathrooms were safe, make sure no one was sleeping in their cars who shouldn't be, and basically just be a presence. A deterrent. The training was minimal. They gave me a flashlight, a radio, and a list of emergency numbers. They told me to call the police if anything serious happened and to never directly confront anyone who seemed dangerous. Just observe and report. That seemed reasonable enough. The first few months were uneventful. I'd do my patrols, occasionally wake up a trucker who'd parked in the wrong area, help someone with a dead battery, deal with the occasional drunk person making noise. Nothing scary, just boring overnight security work. Then in January, things started to feel different. It began with the truckers. I'd gotten to know some of the regulars, guys who drove the same routes and stopped at the same places on the same nights. They were generally friendly, if a bit gruff. But in early January, some of them started acting strange around me. One guy, older fellow named Rick, who I'd chatted with a dozen times, pulled me aside one night during my patrol. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to say what he was about to say. "You working here every night?" he asked. I told him 5 nights a week, midnight to 8. He nodded slowly, looking past me toward the far end of the parking lot, where the lights didn't quite reach. "You should watch yourself out here," he said. "Late shift is different." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and said to keep my radio close. Then he got in his truck and drove off. I didn't see him stop there again after that. A few nights later, I was doing a patrol around 2 in the morning. It was freezing cold and there weren't many vehicles in the lot. Maybe 6 or 7 cars and a couple of semis parked in the truck area. I was checking the picnic areas behind the main building when I heard it, a sound like scratching. It was coming from the women's bathroom. Long, slow scratching sounds, like fingernails on wood or metal. I stood outside the door, listening. The sound would go for a few seconds, then stop, then start again. I knocked on the door and called out that I was security, asking if everything was okay. The scratching stopped. No one answered. I waited a full minute, then used my key to open the door. The bathroom was empty. All the stalls were open and vacant. But on the inside of the door, there were fresh scratch marks, long gouges in the painted wood, like someone had dragged their nails down it with real force. The marks were deep enough that I could see the bare wood underneath. I reported it over the radio to the day supervisor. He told me to write it up and that maintenance would look at it. His voice sounded tired and unsurprised, like this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. That's when I started to realize that maybe the night shift at this rest stop had a history I didn't know about. I asked around after that. The few other security guards who worked different shifts didn't want to talk about it much. But one of the custodians, a woman in her 50s named Gloria, who cleaned the bathrooms during evening shift, finally told me some of what she knew. People disappear from rest stops, she said. Not a lot. Not enough to make the news or get investigated properly, but enough. Girl went missing from here about 5 years back. Never found her. She told me the girl's name was Sarah Jennings, 22 years old, traveling from Chicago to Denver. Security footage showed her going into the women's bathroom around 3 in the morning. She never came out. Her car was still in the parking lot the next day, keys on the driver's seat, purse still inside, but Sarah was gone. They searched the whole area. Dogs, state police, everything. Found nothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air from a locked bathroom with only one entrance. After Gloria told me that, I started noticing other things. Sometimes, during my patrols, I'd see someone standing at the very edge of the parking lot, right where the light ended and the darkness began. Always too far away to make out details. Just a figure, standing still, watching. When I'd walk toward them to check, they'd be gone by the time I got close. One night in early February, around 3:30 in the morning, I was sitting in the security office doing paperwork when my radio crackled. It was strange because no one else was on duty. Just me. But I heard something through the static. A voice. Quiet and broken up. "Help me." That was all. Just those 2 words in a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Then nothing but static. I tried to respond, but got no answer. I checked the parking lot cameras. Empty. Nothing moving. I did a full patrol of the entire facility, including both bathroom buildings. Everything was locked and empty. The next morning, I asked the day's supervisor about the radio channels, whether anyone else could accidentally broadcast on our frequency. He said it was possible, but unlikely. Then he asked if I'd heard something. I told him about the voice. He got quiet for a moment, then said, "If you hear that again, don't respond. Just note the time and move to a different area." That scared me more than anything. The fact that he had a protocol for it. The fact that he didn't seem surprised. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. I kept working there for a few more months, but I was more and more on edge during every shift. I started doing my patrols in pairs, calling on the radio even when no one was there, just to hear my own voice. I avoided the far corners of the parking lot. I stopped going into the bathrooms alone. The final thing that made me quit happened in late March. I was doing a patrol around 1 in the morning. There was a car parked near the building, engine running, headlights on. I approached it following procedure, knocked on the window. The driver rolled it down. A man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a baseball cap. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked at me with his completely blank eyes and said, "Have you seen her?" I asked who he was talking about. "The girl who's been here for 5 years," he said. "She keeps asking for help, but no one comes." My blood went cold. I stepped back from the car, hand on my radio. I asked him who he was and told him he needed to move along. He smiled then, not a friendly smile. Something wrong with it. "You should leave this place," he said, "before you're the one asking for help." Then he rolled up his window and drove away. I wrote down his license plate, gave it to the police. They ran it. The plate came back registered to a woman who died in a car accident 7 years ago. I put in my 2 weeks' notice the next day. They didn't try to talk me out of it. The supervisor just nodded and asked when my last shift would be. I work at a warehouse now. Day shift. Fluorescent lights and concrete floors and normal boring work. I don't miss the rest stop job at all, but sometimes I think about Sarah Jennings. I think about that voice on the radio asking for help. I think about those scratch marks on the bathroom door and that figure standing in the darkness at the edge of the parking lot. And I wonder if she's still there somehow, still trying to get someone to notice, still asking for help that never comes. I wonder how many people stop there every night and never realize they're walking past something that's been trapped there for years, just beyond the edge of what we can see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it was all just a series of coincidences and my imagination working overtime on too many lonely night shifts. But I don't think I am. Rest stops have these bulletin boards usually, right near the entrance to the main building. They're covered in local business cards, flyers for tourist attractions, notices about missing pets. I never paid much attention to them until one summer night in 2022 when I was driving through Missouri. I'm a freelance photographer, which means I spend a lot of time on the road going to different shoots. It was late July, brutally hot even after sunset, and I was driving from Kansas City to St. Louis for a wedding job the next morning. Around 11 at night, I stopped at a rest area off Highway 70 to get some air and walk around for a bit. The place was fairly busy for that time of night. Families, truckers, couples, all the usual rest stop crowds. I used the bathroom, bought a Coke from the vending machine, and was walking back to my car when something on the bulletin board caught my eye. It was a photo. Not a flyer or a business card. An actual printed photograph pinned to the board among all the other papers. It showed a rest stop at night, this rest stop, taken from the parking lot. You could see the building lit up, a few cars parked nearby, but in the foreground of the photo, there was a person, a woman, standing with her back to the camera, looking toward the building. Something about her posture seemed wrong. Stiff. Too still. I'm a photographer, so I notice these things. The image quality was decent, probably taken with a smartphone. But what made me stop and really look at it was the note written at the bottom of the photo in red marker. "Do you see her too?" That was it. No context, no name, just that question. I looked around the parking lot, half expecting to see someone matching the figure in the photo. But there were just regular people walking to and from their cars, nobody paying attention to me or the bulletin board. I took a picture of it with my phone. I'm not sure why. Professional habit, maybe. Then I got in my car and continued towards St. Louis. I didn't think much about it until 2 weeks later when I was driving back through Missouri on my way home to Kansas City. I stopped at the same rest area, this time during the late afternoon. I don't know what made me check the bulletin board again. Curiosity, probably. The photo was gone, but there was a new one in its place. This photo showed the same rest stop, same angle, but it was a different night. You could tell because the cars in the parking lot were different. And the woman was in this photo too, the same figure with her back to the camera. But she was closer to the building this time, maybe 20 feet closer than she'd been in the first photo. The note at the bottom, in the same red marker, said, "She's moving." My stomach dropped. I pulled the photo down from the bulletin board and looked at it more carefully. The woman was definitely closer to the building than in the first photo. Same posture, same stiff, unnatural stance, but a different position. I looked around the rest area. It was busy with afternoon traffic. Families with kids, elderly couples, people walking dogs. Nobody suspicious. Nobody watching me. I kept the photo. I put it in my car and sat there for a few minutes, comparing it on my phone to the picture I'd taken of the first photo 2 weeks earlier. They were definitely showing progression. The woman was moving closer to the building between photos. I should have just driven away and forgotten about it. But I'm stubborn, and I wanted to understand what I was seeing. So I went into the rest area building and found a custodian, an older guy emptying trash cans. I showed him the photo and asked if he'd seen anyone posting these pictures. He looked at it, and his face went pale. He handed it back to me quickly, like he didn't want to touch it. "You should throw that away," he said. I asked him why. "Because someone's been putting those up for months now," he said. Different pictures, same woman in everyone. She gets closer each time. Management takes them down, but new ones keep appearing. Police looked into it. Couldn't figure out who was doing it. He told me the photos started showing up back in March. At first, it was just one every few weeks. Then they started appearing more frequently. Always the same rest stop, always at night, always showing that woman getting closer to the building. "What happens when she reaches the building?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't want to know." I left after that, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm a photographer. I understand composition and staging. Someone was taking these photos, printing them, and posting them deliberately. But why? What was the point? I started doing research when I got home. I searched online for information about that specific rest area, looking for any news stories or incidents. I found something from 2019. A woman named Jennifer Kozlowski had gone missing from that rest area. She'd been traveling alone, driving from Colorado to Virginia. Security footage showed her parking her car around midnight, going into the building and then walking back out 15 minutes later. She stood in the parking lot for a moment, then walked toward the far end of the lot, away from the lights, and just disappeared into the darkness beyond the camera's range. They never found her. Her car was still there the next morning, phone, purse, everything still inside. But Jennifer was gone. The last security camera image of her showed her walking away from the building, her back to the camera, heading toward the darkness at the edge of the parking lot. The exact posture and angle as the woman in the photos. I felt sick when I made the connection. Was someone recreating her disappearance, documenting it in reverse, showing her walking back from wherever she'd gone? I decided to drive back to that rest stop one more time. I had to know if another photo had appeared. This was stupid, I know, but I couldn't let it go. I drove out there on a Saturday night in early August. I got there around 11:30 p.m., roughly the same time Jennifer Kozlowski had been there in 2019. The parking lot was half full. Normal rest stop activity. I went straight to the bulletin board. There was a new photo. This one showed the woman standing right in front of the building entrance, close enough that you could almost make out details of her clothing. She was wearing jeans and a dark jacket, still with her back to the camera, still impossibly still. The note said, "Tonight." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to take a picture of it. As I did, someone behind me spoke. "You've been following the photos." I spun around. A woman was standing there, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and tired eyes. She was holding a camera, a nice one, a DSLR with a good lens. "Are you the one posting these?" I asked. She nodded. "My sister disappeared from here 3 years ago, Jennifer Kozlowski. You probably found her story if you've been researching this place." I told her I had. I asked her why she was doing this, why she was posting these photos. "Because she's still here," the woman said. "Her name was Amy, Jennifer's younger sister. I've seen her, late at night when the rest area is quiet. She's in the parking lot. She stands there, looking at the building, like she's trying to remember how to come back inside." Amy told me she'd been coming to this rest stop every few weeks since her sister disappeared, always late at night, and she kept seeing the same thing. A figure in the parking lot, always with its back turned, always standing in that strange, still way. Each time she saw it, it was a little closer to the building. "I started photographing it," Amy said. "I thought if I could document it, maybe someone would believe me. Maybe someone would help me figure out what happened to her." I asked her if she'd ever tried to approach the figure, to see who or what it was. "Once," she said. Her voice got quiet. "Last month, I walked toward her, got within maybe 10 feet, and she turned around." Amy stopped talking for a moment. When she continued, her voice was shaking. "It looked like Jennifer. Same face, same hair. But something was wrong with her eyes. They were empty. And she opened her mouth like she was trying to talk, but no sound came out. Then she just faded, like she was never there. We stood there in silence for a moment. Other people walked past us, going in and out of the building, completely oblivious to our conversation. "Why does the new photo say, 'tonight'?" I asked. Amy looked at me with those tired eyes. "Because this is the closest I've ever seen her get. I think tonight is when she finally makes it back inside, and I need to be here when she does. I need to see what happens." She asked if I'd stay with her. She'd been doing this alone for months, and she wanted someone else there as a witness. Against my better judgment, I said yes. We waited in the parking lot as the hours passed. Midnight came and went. The rest area got quieter. One by one, people left. By 2 a.m, there were only a handful of cars left, including ours. That's when I saw her. At the far end of the parking lot, right at the edge of the light, a figure was standing, a woman, her back to us, facing the building, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. Amy grabbed my arm. "That's her." We watched as the figure began to walk. Slow, stiff steps, moving toward the building. It took her several minutes to cross the parking lot. The whole time, she never turned around, never looked side to side, just walked straight ahead in that mechanical, wrong way. She reached the entrance to the building. The doors were automatic, and they slid open as she approached. She stood there for a moment in the doorway, silhouetted against the fluorescent lights inside. Then she stepped through. Amy and I ran toward the building. We burst through the doors maybe 10 seconds after the figure had entered. The interior was empty. No one in the lobby area. We checked the bathrooms. Empty. We looked in every corner, every stall. Nothing. No one. She'd vanished again. Amy started crying. I didn't know what to say. We filed a report with the state police that night, but I could tell they thought we were either lying or hallucinating. They took statements and told us they'd look into it. They never called back. I haven't been back to that rest area since that night. Amy texts me sometimes. She's still looking for her sister, still trying to understand what happened. The photos have stopped appearing on the bulletin board. Whatever process was happening, whatever journey that figure was making back toward the building, it's complete now. But sometimes I wonder what happened after she stepped through those doors. Where did she go? If it really was Jennifer's ghost or spirit or whatever, did she finally move on? Or is she still there, trapped in some space between here and wherever she disappeared to? I don't have answers. All I have are the photos on my phone and the memory of watching that impossible figure walk across the parking lot and disappear into the light. And the knowledge that rest stops aren't always just places where we stop to rest. Sometimes they're places where people get stuck, caught between leaving and arriving, unable to complete the journey. I hope Jennifer found peace. I hope Amy finds closure. But I don't think either of them will. I met Daniel at a rest stop in Tennessee. This was 4 years ago, summer of 2021, and I was driving from Atlanta to Nashville for a music festival. I'd stopped at one of those big travel plazas, the kind with restaurants and a convenience store, to grab lunch and stretch my legs. Daniel approached me while I was sitting at a picnic table outside eating a sandwich. He was maybe 40 years old. Friendly smile, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt. He asked if I minded if he sat down since all the other tables were taken. I said sure. It seemed harmless enough. The place was busy with other travelers. It was broad daylight. Nothing about the situation felt dangerous. We made small talk while we ate. He told me he was driving to Nashville too, coming from Birmingham. He was a sales rep for a medical supply company. Had meetings in Nashville on Monday. I told him about the festival I was going to. We talked about music, traffic, the usual road trip conversation topics. When we finished eating, he mentioned that he'd noticed my car had a flat tire. Rear driver's side. He said he'd seen it when he parked next to me and wanted to let me know. My stomach dropped. A flat tire in the middle of a long drive is exactly the kind of thing I'd been worried about. I'd driven 6 hours from Atlanta and had another 3 hours to go. I thanked him and went to check. He was right. The tire was completely flat. I had no idea how I'd driven on it without noticing. Daniel came with me to look at it. "You've got a spare?" he asked. I told him I did, but I'd never actually changed a tire before. I'd always had ADA or someone else do it for me. "I can help you," he offered. "I've changed 100 of these. Won't take more than 20 minutes. I hesitated. You're always told not to trust strangers, especially men you've just met at rest stops. But we were in a busy public place. There were families and other travelers all around, and I really needed help with the tire. So I said yes. He changed my tire while I watched and tried to help where I could. He was efficient and friendly, explaining what he was doing at each step. When he finished, I offered to pay him, but he waved me off. "Just pay it forward," he said. "Help someone else when they need it." We said goodbye, and I got back on the highway feeling grateful. What were the odds of meeting someone so helpful at exactly the right time? About 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I normally don't answer those, but I was in a good mood, so I picked up. It was Daniel. "Hey," he said. "I realized after you left that you should really get that tire properly patched or replaced soon. The spare is only temporary." I thanked him for the reminder and asked how he'd gotten my number. I didn't remember giving it to him. "Oh, you wrote it on the paper with your ADA info," he said. "When you were checking if your membership was current, I took a quick picture just in case you needed help later." I didn't remember doing that, but I'd been flustered about the tire. Maybe I had. We chatted for a minute more, then hung up. Another hour passed. I was getting close to Nashville when my phone rang again. Daniel. "Where are you now?" he asked. Something about the question made me uncomfortable. "Getting close to Nashville," I said carefully. "What exit?" I didn't answer that. Instead, I asked why he wanted to know. "Just making sure you're staying safe," he said. "Roads can be dangerous for a woman traveling alone." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I told him I was fine and that I needed to go. He said okay and hung up. But then he called back 5 minutes later. And 5 minutes after that. And again. Each time I didn't answer. Each time he left a voicemail. The messages started friendly but got progressively stranger. "Just wanted to check on you. You're not answering. Is everything okay? I'm worried about you. You should pick up. Why aren't you answering me?" I turned off my phone. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I got off the highway at the next exit and pulled into a gas station that looked busy and well lit. I went inside and told the cashier that someone was harassing me. She let me stay behind the counter while her manager called the police. The sheriff's deputy showed up about 15 minutes later. I explained what had happened. He took down all the information, including Daniel's phone number from my call history. He told me to keep my phone off for now and to file a formal report when I got to Nashville. The deputy followed me to the hotel where I was staying for the festival. I checked in, went to my room, and finally turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, all from Daniel's number, and one text message that made my blood run cold. "I know where you're staying." I called the police immediately. They sent officers to the hotel. They tried calling Daniel's number, but it went straight to voicemail. They traced it and found out it was a burner phone, probably bought with cash at some convenience store. The officers stayed at the hotel for a few hours. They checked the parking lot and the surrounding area. No sign of anyone matching Daniel's description. They told me to stay in my room, keep the door locked, and call 911 if anything happened. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every car in the parking lot might have been him. I kept thinking about how easily I'd trusted him, how normal he'd seemed, how he'd been helpful and friendly right up until the moment he wasn't. The next day, I filed a full police report. They took it seriously, especially given the escalation from helpful stranger to threatening stalker in just a few hours. They pulled security footage from the rest stop where we'd met. They got a clear image of him and his car. They ran his license plate. The plate was stolen, taken off a car in Birmingham 3 days earlier. They never found him. They looked for a while, sent his photo to police departments in Alabama and Tennessee, checked hotel records. Nothing. It was like he'd disappeared. I went home instead of staying for the festival. I drove during the day, took only busy routes, stopped only at rest areas that were crowded. The whole time I kept checking my mirrors, terrified I'd see his car behind me. He never called again after that first night, but about a month later, I got a package in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photo printed on regular copy paper. It showed me sitting at that picnic table at the rest stop in Tennessee, eating my sandwich. The photo was taken from a distance, probably zoomed in with a decent camera. I was alone in the photo. Daniel wasn't in the shot, which meant he'd taken it before approaching me. He'd been watching me, photographing me, before introducing himself as a friendly stranger who just happened to notice my flat tire. I moved to a new apartment after that. Changed my phone number. I'm more careful now about who I talk to, especially at rest stops. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. I've gone over that day 1,000 times in my memory. I never noticed my tire going flat while I was driving. It would have made noise, pulled to one side, something. But I felt nothing unusual. I checked with a mechanic later, described the situation. He told me that for a tire to go completely flat without the driver noticing, especially on a highway, it would have to be deflated slowly and deliberately. Not a nail or normal puncture. Someone would have to let the air out manually, which means Daniel probably flattened my tire himself before approaching me. He created the problem so he could offer the solution, so he could appear helpful and gain my trust. And the scariest part? If he did that to me, I wasn't his first. You don't come up with a plan like that on the spot. You don't have burner phones and stolen plates and watch your targets from a distance unless you've done it before. I reported all of this to the police. They said they'd look into similar incidents at rest stops in the region. They never told me if they found anything. I still drive long distances sometimes. I have to. But I never stop at rest stops alone anymore. I hold it until I reach a town. I plan my trips around gas stations that are busy and well lit. I check my tires before every drive and keep my doors locked, even in parking lots. And I never ever accept help from a friendly stranger who just happens to be in the right place at the right time. Because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem helpful. The ones who smile and offer assistance and make you feel safe right up until the moment you realize you've made a terrible mistake. I got lucky. He lost interest or moved on to someone else or got spooked when the police got involved. But somewhere out there, maybe at a rest stop in Tennessee or Alabama or somewhere else entirely, Daniel is probably sitting at a picnic table right now, eating lunch and waiting for the right person to walk by. Someone traveling alone. Someone vulnerable. Someone who'll trust a friendly smile and an offer of help. I just hope whoever that person is, they're more careful than I was. The call came while I was on the road. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but it had my hometown area code, so I answered. I was driving through Virginia, somewhere between Richmond and Roanoke, making my way home to North Carolina after a work conference in D.C. "Is this Marcus?" A woman's voice, professional and calm. I said yes, asked who was calling. "This is Riverside Hospital in Asheville. Your father has been in an accident. He's in the ICU. You need to get here as soon as possible." My heart dropped into my stomach. My dad was 73, living alone since my mom died. I asked what happened, how bad it was. The woman gave me some medical details that sounded serious. Head trauma, internal bleeding. He'd been asking for me. She told me to drive safely, but to hurry. Then she gave me a direct number to call when I got close. A nurse's station number where I could get updates. I immediately changed my route. Instead of taking my planned stops, I decided to push straight through. Asheville was about 4 hours away. I'd be there by 9 or 10 p.m. if I didn't stop, but about an hour and a half into the drive, I desperately needed to use a bathroom. I'd had 3 coffees at the conference that afternoon. I couldn't make it 4 more hours. When I saw signs for a rest area, I reluctantly pulled off. The rest stop was small and not well lit. Just a bathroom building and a parking lot with maybe 6 or 7 other cars. I parked close to the building, left my engine running, and ran inside. When I came back out 2 minutes later, there was a man standing next to my car. He was maybe 50 years old, wearing a maintenance uniform with a name tag. He smiled when he saw me. "This your vehicle?" he asked. I said yes. Asked if there was a problem. "Just noticed you left it running," he said. "Not safe to do that. Lots of theft at rest stops. People will jump in and drive off while you're in the bathroom." I thanked him for the concern and moved to get in my car. He didn't step aside. "You seem like you're in a hurry," he said. "Everything okay?" I told him about my father, about the hospital call. I just wanted him to move so I could leave. His expression changed. Concerned, sympathetic. "Asheville? That's a few hours from here. You shouldn't drive that when you're stressed and upset. Accidents happen when people are emotional." I told him I'd be fine and reached for my door handle. He put his hand on the door, keeping it closed. "Tell you what," he said. "There's a motel about 5 miles up the road. Clean place, reasonable prices. Why don't you rest for a few hours, clear your head, then drive to Asheville in the morning when you're calmer?" Something about this felt wrong. Why was he so insistent? Why wouldn't he let me leave? "I need to go," I said firmly. "Please move." He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just trying to help. You're not thinking straight. Your dad would want you to arrive safely, right?" That's when I noticed something. His uniform said State Highway Maintenance, but we weren't on a state highway. This was an interstate rest stop, federal property. And his name tag looked printed, not embroidered like official uniforms usually are. "Who are you?" I asked. "I told you, I work here. I'm trying to help." "No," I said. "You don't work here. Move away from my car or I'm calling the police." His friendly expression dropped. For just a second, I saw something else underneath. Something cold and calculating. Then he stepped back, hands raised. "Hey, no problem. Just trying to be helpful. Have a safe drive." He walked away toward a white panel van parked at the far end of the lot. I got in my car, locked the doors, and got out of there as fast as I could. My hands were shaking as I drove. I called the hospital number the woman had given me, wanting to check on my dad and let them know I was on my way. It rang 6 times, then went to a generic voicemail. No hospital name, just leave a message. A terrible feeling washed over me. I called my dad's cell phone directly. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Marcus, what's up?" "Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why?" I asked if he'd been in an accident, if he was in the hospital. He said no, he was at home watching TV. What was I talking about? I pulled off at the next exit and parked in a shopping center parking lot. My whole body was shaking now. I explained about the call, about the hospital. My dad confirmed he was completely fine, hadn't been in any accident. "Someone lied to you," he said. His voice was tight with anger. "Someone tried to lure you somewhere. Where are you right now?" I told him. He said to stay in a public place and to call the police immediately. I did. The Virginia State Police took my report very seriously. When I described the fake maintenance worker at the rest stop, the officer on the phone went quiet for a moment. "Can you describe him in detail?" she asked. I did. Middle-aged, white, maybe 5'10", wearing a fake uniform, driving a white panel van. "Stay where you are," she said. "I'm sending a unit to you now." 2 state troopers showed up about 15 minutes later. They had me go through the whole story again. Then one of them showed me a photo on his phone. "Is this the man?" It was him. Same face, same build. The photo looked like a DMV picture. "Who is he?" I asked. The trooper's expression was grim. "His name is William Driscoll. He's been on our radar for about 2 years. We think he's been targeting people at rest stops, using various methods to separate them from their vehicles or lure them to secondary locations." He explained that they'd linked Driscoll to at least 3 disappearances, all people who'd stopped at rest areas along I-81 in Virginia. In each case, the victims had received some kind of urgent call or message shortly before stopping. A family emergency, a problem with their credit card, a lottery winning that needed immediate verification. Something to get them flustered and not thinking clearly. Then Driscoll would approach them at the rest stop, usually posing as some kind of authority figure or helpful worker. He'd try to get them to either leave their vehicle or follow him somewhere. The 3 people who disappeared had last been seen talking to a man matching his description. "You're lucky you didn't trust him," the trooper said. "Very lucky." They asked if I'd be willing to testify if they caught him. I said absolutely. They took detailed statements, photos of my car, and told me they were sending units to the rest stop I described. But I knew Driscoll would be long gone by now. They were right. When officers checked the rest area, the white van was gone. Security cameras showed it leaving about 3 minutes after I did. The cameras also showed Driscoll making a phone call while walking to his van. Probably to whoever had called me pretending to be from the hospital. It was a team operation. At least 2 people, maybe more. One to make the luring calls, one to approach the targets at rest stops. The state police told me to continue to Asheville if I wanted, but to stop only at busy, well-lit locations. They also flagged my license plate in their system so any officer who saw me could check that I was okay. I appreciated that more than I can say. I drove the rest of the way to my dad's house, where I stayed for 3 days just to decompress. I kept thinking about how close I'd come. If I'd trusted that fake maintenance worker, if I'd been a little more panicked about my dad and not thinking clearly, if he'd been more convincing, or I'd been more gullible. The state police called me a few weeks later. They'd arrested William Driscoll and 2 accomplices at a rest stop in West Virginia. They'd been trying the same scam on someone else, but this time, unmarked police cars had been watching. They caught them in the act. Driscoll and his team had been doing this for at least 5 years. They targeted people traveling alone, made them think there was an emergency or urgent situation, and then either robbed them or worse at rest stops when the victims were vulnerable. The 3 people who disappeared were eventually found. I won't go into details, but none of them survived. I had to testify at the trial. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to sit in the same room as Driscoll and describe how he'd tried to manipulate me, how he'd stood next to my car and tried to keep me from leaving, how he'd smiled while plotting something terrible. He's in prison now, 40 years without parole. His accomplices got similar sentences. The case made national news for a while. Rest stop predator is what the media called him. But here's what still haunts me. The fake hospital call was so specific. They knew my name, knew my father's name, knew I had an aging parent I'd drop everything to help. That kind of information isn't random. They'd researched me somehow. Social media, probably. Maybe I'd posted about my dad at some point. Maybe a photo or a comment that gave them enough information to craft a convincing story. I've locked down all my social media since then. No public posts, No location sharing, no details about my family or my travel plans. It feels paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that there are other people out there doing the same thing. Watching, researching, looking for the right target and the right story to tell. Rest stops are supposed to be safe places, neutral ground where travelers can take a break. But they're also perfect hunting grounds for predators. People are alone, away from home, vulnerable. If something happens, you're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by strangers who will drive away in 5 minutes and never think about you again. I still use rest stops when I have to, but I'm careful now. I watch everyone around me. I don't trust helpful strangers. And if I get an emergency call from an unknown number, I verify it independently before I react. Because the scariest monsters aren't the ones in horror stories. They're the ones who look normal, who smile and offer help, who sound professional on the phone. They're the ones who know that the best way to hurt someone is to first make them afraid for someone they love. This happened to my girlfriend Rachel about 2 years ago. She told me the story on our 3rd date, and I honestly almost didn't believe her. But I've seen how she reacts to rest stops now. The way she tenses up when we drive past them. The way she'd rather wait an extra hour to stop at a gas station in a town instead of using a rest area. After hearing what happened, I understand why. Rachel was driving from Portland, Oregon to Boise, Idaho to visit her sister. It's normally about a 7-hour drive. She left early in the morning, planning to get there by mid-afternoon. Everything was fine until she crossed into Idaho and stopped at a rest area somewhere past Ontario. It was late morning, maybe 11 or so. The rest stop was fairly busy. Families, RVs, the usual mix of travelers. Rachel parked her car, a blue Toyota Camry, and went inside to use the bathroom. She was in there for maybe 5 minutes. When she came back out and walked across the parking lot, she hit her key fob to unlock her car. She heard the beep, saw the lights flash. She got in. That's when she realized something was wrong. The interior was similar to her car, but not quite right. There was an air freshener hanging from the mirror that she didn't own. The floor mats were different. And there was a coffee cup in the cup holder that wasn't hers. She'd gotten into the wrong car. It was another blue Toyota Camry, parked 2 spaces away from hers. Her key fob had unlocked it by chance. Same make, model, and year. Same key frequency or whatever it is that makes electronic keys work. Rachel got out immediately, embarrassed and flustered. She looked around to see if anyone had noticed, but people were just walking to and from their cars, paying her no attention. She went to her actual car 2 spaces over and got in, feeling stupid but relieved it had just been an honest mistake. She started the engine and was about to put the car in reverse when her passenger door opened. A man got in. Rachel screamed and fumbled for the lock button. The man grabbed her wrist. "Drive," he said quietly. "Don't make a scene. Just drive." She looked at him in terror. He was maybe 35, clean cut, wearing jeans and a button-up shirt. He looked normal, like any other traveler at a rest stop, but his grip on her wrist was painful and his eyes were cold. "Please," Rachel whispered. "Please, I don't have much money, but you can have my wallet. Just please don't, I don't want your wallet," he said. "I want you to drive to the truck parking area. Over there." He nodded toward the far side of the rest stop, where semi-trucks were parked away from the main lot. Rachel's training from every self-defense class she'd ever taken kicked in. Never go to a second location. Never let someone take you somewhere isolated. Whatever happens in a public place is better than what will happen if you're alone with them. She started screaming, loud, sustained screaming. The man tried to cover her mouth, but she bit his hand. He pulled back, cursing. Rachel threw open her door and fell out of the car, still screaming. People were running toward them now, other travelers, a few men from nearby cars. The man in her passenger seat jumped out and ran, not toward a car, but toward the tree line beyond the rest area. He disappeared into the woods before anyone could stop him. Someone called 911. Rachel was shaking so hard she could barely stand. A couple stayed with her, a middle-aged man and woman who'd been parked nearby. They kept telling her she was safe now, that it was over. But Rachel kept looking toward the woods where the man had disappeared. The police arrived within 10 minutes, Oregon State Police, since the rest area was right on the border. They took statements from Rachel and from the couple who'd witnessed the man running. They searched the rest area and the surrounding woods. They found nothing. But when they checked the other blue Camry, the one Rachel had accidentally gotten into first, they found something in the trunk. Rope, duct tape, a tarp, and a hunting knife. The car was registered to the man's mother in Boise. When police contacted her, she said her son had borrowed it 3 days ago and she hadn't seen him since. She gave them his name, Trevor Hitchens. He had a record, assault, battery, a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend, but nothing that had put him in prison. The police told Rachel that Trevor had probably been watching her. He'd seen her get into the wrong car by mistake, and he'd realized that if her key fob could unlock his car, his could probably unlock hers. So he'd gotten into her car and waited. If she'd driven where he told her to the isolated truck parking area, no one would have seen what happened next. The rope and knife in his trunk told the story of what he'd planned. But Rachel had screamed. She'd fought. She'd refused to go to that second location, and that had saved her life. They never caught Trevor Hitchens. He disappeared into those woods and never emerged. Or maybe he did emerge, somewhere down the highway and hitched a ride or stole a car. The police searched for weeks. They found his mother's Camry abandoned at the rest stop, the trunk full of his tools, but no sign of Trevor himself. There's a theory that he died in the woods, maybe from exposure or an accident. Another theory is that he had a second car stashed somewhere and got away. Rachel doesn't care which theory is true. She just knows he's out there, or someone like him is. She told me this story in a quiet booth at a coffee shop in Portland. Her hands shook a little when she described him getting into her car, the way he'd grabbed her wrist, the coldness in his eyes. The worst part, she said, is thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten into the wrong car first. If I'd just gone straight to my car and gotten in. He still would have been able to unlock it with his key. He still could have gotten in, but I wouldn't have had that moment of confusion, that extra few seconds to realize something was wrong. I might have already been driving before I noticed him in the passenger seat, and by then we'd be away from the crowd, away from help. She paused, staring into her coffee cup. Getting into the wrong car saved my life, she said. Making that stupid mistake is the only reason I'm here. We've been together for 2 years now. Rachel still makes that drive to Boise sometimes to see her sister, but she plans it differently. She leaves early enough that she can make it the whole way without stopping at that rest area. If she has to stop somewhere, she uses busy gas stations in towns. She checks her back seat before getting in her car. She locks the doors immediately, and she parks in different spots every time, never in a place where there are cars that look like hers. Sometimes I catch her looking at other blue Camrys in parking lots. Her expression goes distant, like she's remembering something she wishes she could forget. There are over 200 million licensed drivers in America. Millions of cars on the road every day, and sometimes, by pure chance, your key will unlock a car that isn't yours. It's rare, but it happens. Electronic key fobs have millions of possible combinations, but not infinite. Which means Trevor Hitchens didn't plan what happened to Rachel. He couldn't have. It was pure chance that her key opened his car, pure chance that she made that mistake. But he'd been prepared anyway. He had the rope and the knife and the tarp ready, which means Rachel wasn't going to be his first, and if she'd been even a little less careful, a little less willing to fight back, she wouldn't have been his last. I do a lot of night driving for my job. I'm a courier for a medical supply company, which means I drive specimens and equipment between hospitals and labs all across the Midwest. Most of my routes are overnight, when traffic is light and I can make better time. I've been doing it for 6 years now, and I've gotten used to the loneliness of empty highways at 3 in the morning. You see a lot of strange things when you drive at night, animals you don't expect. Other drivers doing things that make no sense, the occasional hitchhiker standing in places where no sane person would be. But for the most part, it's just me and the road and whatever podcast or audiobook I'm listening to. Last November, I was driving from Indianapolis to St. Louis, a route I'd done hundreds of times. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and I was somewhere in southern Illinois. I needed to stop and use a bathroom, and I saw a sign for a rest area coming up. I pulled off the highway and immediately knew something was wrong. The rest area was dark. Not closed for the night dark, but completely abandoned dark. No lights in the parking lot. No lights in the building. The whole place looked like it hadn't been used in years. I should have just driven away and found somewhere else to stop. But I really needed a bathroom, and the next town was 20 miles away. I figured maybe the rest area was closed for renovation or something, but the bathrooms might still be accessible. I parked near the building and grabbed my flashlight from the glove box. As I walked toward the bathrooms, I could see that the whole place was in disrepair. Cracked pavement. Weeds growing through the concrete, graffiti on the walls. This wasn't a rest area that had been closed temporarily. This had been abandoned for a long time. The door to the men's room was propped open with a brick. I pushed it wider and shined my flashlight inside. The bathroom was trashed, broken mirrors, graffiti everywhere, one of the sinks ripped off the wall. It smelled terrible, like mold and something worse. I decided I'd rather piss in the woods. As I turned to leave, I heard something, a voice, coming from inside the bathroom. "Hello?" I froze. The voice was male, weak and hoarse. It sounded like it was coming from one of the stalls. "Is someone there?" the voice asked. I should have run. Every instinct told me to run, but I'm not proud to admit that my first thought was that someone might actually need help. Maybe a homeless person or someone who'd gotten hurt. "Yeah, I'm here," I called out. "Are you okay?" "Help me," the voice said. "Please help me. I can't get out." I shined my flashlight toward the stalls. The doors were all hanging open except for one, the last stall on the end. I could see feet under the door. Someone was sitting on the toilet. "What's wrong?" I asked, taking a step closer. "Are you hurt?" "The door," the voice said. "It's stuck. I've been here for hours. Please help me get out." I walked closer, keeping my flashlight pointed at the stall. Something about this felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The voice sounded genuinely distressed, and if someone really was trapped in there, I needed to help. I reached the stall door and grabbed the handle. It wasn't locked. It opened easily. The stall was empty. No one was there. No one was sitting on the toilet. But I'd seen feet. I'd seen legs under the door. I stepped back, heart pounding, and swung my flashlight around the bathroom. Empty. I was alone. Then I heard the voice again, right behind me. "Thank you for opening the door." I spun around. There was a man standing in the bathroom doorway. He was pale, thin, wearing clothes that looked wrong somehow, too old-fashioned. He was smiling at me. "Who are you?" I managed to say. "I've been waiting for someone to let me out," he said. "You can't imagine how long I've been here." He took a step toward me. I backed up until I hit the wall. There was nowhere to go. He was between me and the only exit. "Stay away from me," I said, trying to sound commanding, but hearing the shake in my own voice. "You opened the door," he said. "You let me out. Now I can leave." He walked past me, not touching me, and headed toward the exit. I stood there, frozen, not understanding what was happening. When he reached the doorway, he turned back to look at me. "Don't stay here too long," he said. "Others might hear you too." Then he walked out into the parking lot and disappeared into the darkness beyond my car. I ran. I didn't think, didn't process what I'd just seen, just ran to my car, got in and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. When the engine started, I put the car in drive and floored it, tearing out of that rest area and back onto the highway. I drove for 20 miles before I pulled over at a well-lit gas station where I finally used the bathroom. I sat in my car afterward, trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what had happened. There were no feet under that stall door. I know what I saw, but I also know that when I opened the door, no one was there. The voice had been real. The man in the doorway had been real, but the person in the stall wasn't. I looked up the rest area when I got home the next morning. I found an article from the local newspaper dated 12 years ago. The rest area had been closed after a man died there. His name was Michael Pritchard. He'd stopped there late at night, went into the bathroom, and had a heart attack in one of the stalls. He wasn't found for 2 days. The article included a photo. It was him, the man I'd seen in the doorway. I've driven past that rest area dozens of times since then. I never stop. I never even look at it when I pass the exit. But sometimes I think about what he said. Others might hear you too. How many voices are in that bathroom? How many people are trapped there, calling out to anyone who might wander in? And what happens if you answer them? I don't want to know. I never want to know. This story comes from my uncle, who worked as an overnight custodian at rest stops in Iowa for almost 10 years. He told it to me at a family gathering last year after a few beers and when most of the other relatives had gone home. I'd mentioned that I was planning a road trip, and he got this look on his face and said there was something I should know about rest stops. My uncle, I'll call him Mike, started working the overnight shift at rest areas in 2009. The job was simple. Clean the bathrooms, empty the trash, make sure everything was stocked and ready for the morning rush. He worked alone, usually from midnight to 6 a.m., covering 2 or 3 different rest stops along I-80. The pay was decent for what it was, and Mike liked the solitude. He'd always been a loner, preferred quiet work to dealing with customers or co-workers. Cleaning empty bathrooms at 3 in the morning suited him fine. For the first few years, nothing unusual happened. It was boring work, but boring was good. He'd listen to podcasts while he mopped floors and scrubbed toilets, and the nights would pass without incident. But then in 2012, things started to get strange. It began with small stuff. Mike would clean a bathroom thoroughly, every stall and sink and mirror, then move on to empty the trash outside. When he'd come back in to do a final check, there would be muddy footprints on the floor he'd just mopped, leading from the entrance to the back stall, then stopping. No one else was there. No cars in the parking lot except his maintenance truck. But the footprints were fresh and wet. At first he thought maybe he'd missed them, or they were his own footprints somehow. But they were too small to be his. They only appeared in one bathroom at one specific rest stop, the one near Walcott. Then it escalated. Mike started hearing things. Stall doors closing when he was in a different part of the bathroom. Whispers that sounded like they were coming from the vents. Once, he heard what sounded like someone crying softly in one of the stalls. When he checked, no one was there. He almost quit. But he needed the job, and he told himself it was just his imagination working overtime from too many lonely nights. He tried to rationalize it. Old buildings make sounds. Plumbing echoes. Shadows play tricks when you're tired. But then, one night in October 2012, something happened that he couldn't rationalize. Mike was cleaning the women's bathroom at the Walcott rest stop. It was around 3 in the morning, and he'd just finished mopping the floor when he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me." He turned around. A woman was standing near the sinks. She looked to be in her 30s, blonde hair, wearing a light jacket and jeans. She looked normal, except for one thing. She was soaking wet. Water dripped from her hair and clothes, pooling on the floor Mike had just cleaned. "Sorry," Mike said. "Bathroom's closed for cleaning. You'll have to use the one at the other end of the building." The woman didn't move. She just stared at him with these empty eyes. "I can't find my car," she said. "Can you help me find my car?" Mike felt uncomfortable. Something was wrong with this situation, but he couldn't pin down what. "Where did you park?" he asked. "I don't remember," she said. "I've been looking for a long time." "Well, there's only a few cars out there," Mike said. "Come on, I'll help you look." He started walking toward the exit. The woman followed him. He could hear her wet footsteps behind him, that squelching sound of soaked shoes on tile. When Mike reached the bathroom door and pushed it open, he looked back to hold it for the woman. She was gone. The bathroom was empty. No one behind him. No wet footprints on the floor except for the ones leading from where she'd been standing to where he'd been standing. And those stopped in the middle of the room, not continuing to any exit. Mike stood there, hand on the door, staring at nothing. His heart was pounding. He walked back into the bathroom, checking every stall, looking everywhere. No one. He ran outside to check the parking lot. 3 cars, all accounted for. All with people sleeping inside them or just parked empty. No woman. No one soaking wet. No one who'd just been talking to him. He reported it to his supervisor the next day, told him everything. The footprints, the voices, the woman who'd disappeared. He expected to be laughed at or maybe put on a different route. Instead, his supervisor got quiet and asked which rest stop it had happened at. When Mike said Walcott, the supervisor nodded like he'd been expecting that answer. "That's the 3rd person who's reported something like this at that location," the supervisor said. "Always the overnight shift, always the same bathroom." He pulled out a file and showed Mike a news article from 2007. A woman named Jennifer Keating had disappeared from the Walcott rest area. Her car was found in the parking lot, engine running, driver's door open. Her purse was still inside, but Jennifer was gone. The search went on for weeks. They dragged the nearby creek, searched the woods, interviewed hundreds of people. Nothing. No trace of her was ever found. The woman in the article's photo was blonde, 30-ish, wearing a light jacket in the picture. Mike felt sick when he saw it. It looked exactly like the woman he'd seen in the bathroom. "Other people have seen her," the supervisor said. "Cleaning staff mostly, always at night, always asking for help finding her car." Mike asked why they hadn't told him this before. The supervisor said they didn't want to scare people off the job, and most people never saw anything, but those who did usually quit soon after. Mike didn't quit, though. He couldn't afford to. He had bills to pay and wasn't going to find another job that paid this well with his limited qualifications. So he kept working the overnight shift, kept cleaning that rest stop, and he kept seeing her. Not every night. Sometimes weeks would go by without incident, but then he'd be mopping or restocking paper towels, and she'd be there, standing by the sinks, dripping wet, asking about her car. He learned not to engage with her. He'd just turn around and leave the bathroom for a few minutes. When he came back, she'd be gone. This became his routine, an accommodation he made for sharing his workplace with a ghost, if that's what she was. But the worst night, the one that finally made Mike quit, happened in December of 2018. He was cleaning the bathroom around 2 a.m. when he heard multiple voices. Not just the woman, but several people talking at once, whispering and murmuring, like a crowd having quiet conversations. Mike looked around. The bathroom appeared empty. But the voices were all around him, coming from everywhere and nowhere, and they were getting louder. He tried to leave, but the bathroom door wouldn't open. It wasn't locked. It didn't have a lock. It just wouldn't budge, like something was holding it shut from the other side. The voices got louder still. Mike could make out words now. People saying they were lost. They couldn't find their cars. They'd been looking for so long. Please help them. Please. And then he saw them. Figures started appearing in the mirrors, faces looking out at him from the reflection. Men, women, different ages, all with that same empty, desperate expression, all asking for help. All saying they couldn't find their way out. Mike closed his eyes and prayed. He's not a religious man, never had been, but in that moment he prayed harder than he'd ever prayed in his life. The voices stopped. When he opened his eyes, the bathroom was empty again. The door opened when he tried it. He walked out, got in his maintenance truck, and drove away. He called his supervisor from the road and quit over the phone. He never went back to that rest stop. Never even drove past it if he could help it. When Mike finished telling me this story, he looked at me seriously and said, "If you're driving through Iowa and you need to stop, use a gas station in a town. Don't stop at that rest area near Walcott. Hell, don't stop at any rest area if you can help it. There are things at those places that don't leave when they're supposed to. People who can't find their way out." I asked him if he really believed what he'd seen was real, if he truly thought there were ghosts of missing people trapped at that rest stop. He thought about it for a moment, then said, "I don't know what they were, ghosts, imprints, something else. But I know what I saw, and I know that woman wasn't the only one. There were others in those mirrors. Dozens of them, all lost, all looking for a way out." I took his advice. When I did my road trip through the Midwest that summer, I didn't stop at any rest areas. I went out of my way to find gas stations in towns, even if it added time to my drive. Maybe Mike's story was just the product of too many lonely night shifts and an overactive imagination. Maybe there's a rational explanation for everything he experienced, but I wasn't willing to bet on it. And I'm still not. I picked up a hitchhiker once. I know you're not supposed to. I know all the reasons why it's dangerous, but it was pouring rain, the guy looked harmless, and I was young and stupid. This was back in 2018, and I was driving through Montana on my way to Seattle. I saw him standing at the entrance to a rest area, thumb out, completely soaked. He looked to be in his 60s, wearing a rain jacket and carrying a small backpack. When I pulled over, he ran to the passenger window. "You heading west?" he asked. I told him I was going to Seattle. He said he was trying to get to Missoula, which was on my route. I unlocked the doors and he got in. His name was Frank, or at least that's what he told me. We made small talk for a while. He said he'd been traveling around the country for a few years, seeing the places he'd always wanted to see before he got too old. He'd been a truck driver for 30 years before retiring. Seemed like a nice enough guy. About 45 minutes into the drive, Frank got quiet. He was looking out the window at the rain, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, more serious. "You do a lot of hitchhiking?" I asked, just making conversation. "Used to?" he said. "Not so much anymore." "Why's that?" He didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, "You know about the game, right?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I told him I didn't. Frank turned to look at me. His expression was grave. "The rest stop game," he said. "People play it sometimes. Sick people. It's been going on for years." He explained it to me then, and I wish he hadn't. According to Frank, there's a loose network of people, predators, psychopaths, whatever you want to call them, who target hitchhikers and solo travelers at rest stops. They have a system. They watch for vulnerable people, someone traveling alone, someone without much money, someone who won't be missed right away. They approach these people and offer help. A ride to the next town, a place to stay, whatever the person needs to hear to trust them. Then they take them somewhere isolated and kill them. But that's not even the worst part. It's a competition, Frank said. They keep score. They have, I don't even know what to call it, a leaderboard. They track their kills somehow, compare numbers. The sickest part is they leave markers at rest stops, little signs that others like them can recognize. It lets them know hunting ground from safe ground. I thought he was messing with me. It sounded like an urban legend, something you'd read on the internet and know was fake. I said as much. Frank reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook. He handed it to me. Keep your eyes on the road, but look at this when you stop. We drove in silence for another hour until I pulled off at the next rest area. It was one of those small ones with just bathrooms and a parking lot. While Frank went inside, I opened his notebook. It was filled with notes and sketches. Rest stops across Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Washington. Next to each one was a symbol, a small mark he'd drawn to represent what he'd seen at that location. Most were blank, but some had symbols. A small X scratched into a picnic table. A series of vertical lines carved under a bathroom door. A specific graffiti tag in a certain color. According to Frank's notes, these were the markers. Signals left by the people who played the game. He'd been tracking them for 3 years. When he came back to the car, I asked him how he knew about all this. He was quiet for a long time before answering. I used to drive trucks, he said. I heard rumors on the CB radio. Truckers see a lot, you know. We talk to each other about things we notice. A few years back, there were stories about hitchhikers disappearing from rest stops along certain routes. More than there should be. More than could be explained by the usual risks. Then I met a woman at a truck stop in Idaho. She'd escaped from someone who'd picked her up at a rest area in Utah. She told me about the game, about how the man who'd taken her bragged about it before she managed to get away. She gave me some of the markers to look for. After that, I started noticing them everywhere. Frank had retired early and started documenting what he found. He'd travel from rest stop to rest stop, photographing the markers, trying to establish patterns. He said he'd reported it to the FBI and state police multiple times, but they either didn't believe him or couldn't act without more evidence. How many people do you think they've killed? I asked. Hundreds, Frank said. Maybe thousands. Over how many years? Decades. This isn't new. I think it's been happening since the interstate system was built. Perfect hunting ground. Transient victims. Isolated locations. And if they're careful, if they space things out and don't leave obvious evidence, who's going to connect the dots? People go missing on the road all the time. I drove Frank the rest of the way to Missoula. Before he got out, he tore a few pages from his notebook and gave them to me. These are the rest stops between here and Seattle that I've identified as marked, he said. Don't stop at them if you can help it. And if you have to stop somewhere, stay in well-lit areas. Stay near other people. Don't accept help from strangers, and don't offer it unless you're absolutely sure the situation is safe. I took the pages. I still have them, actually, tucked in my glove compartment. I've looked for the markers Frank described at a few rest stops over the years. I've never found any, but maybe I'm not looking in the right places, or maybe I'm looking in safe locations. I tried to find Frank after that. I wanted to ask him more questions, maybe help with his documentation, but I didn't have his contact information, didn't even know his last name. I searched online for news stories about rest stop disappearances and found a few, but nothing that confirmed or denied what Frank had told me. Sometimes I wonder if he made the whole thing up, an elaborate story to mess with a young, gullible driver who'd picked him up in the rain. But then I think about how serious he was. The notebook full of careful observations, the fear in his eyes when he talked about what he'd learned, and I think about how many people go missing in America every year, hundreds of thousands. Most are found or return home, but some never are. Some just vanish, last seen at a gas station or a rest stop or on a lonely highway with their thumb out. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore, and I'm careful about which rest stops I use. Frank's warning stuck with me. Maybe it was all bullshit. Maybe there is no game and no network of killers tracking points and leaving markers. But maybe there is. And maybe the reason we don't hear about it is because the victims are chosen specifically because no one will notice they're gone. And the killers are smart enough to never hunt close to home, never establish a pattern clear enough to be recognized. I hope Frank is still out there, still documenting what he finds, still trying to warn people. He said he couldn't stop the game, but maybe he could save a few people by spreading awareness. So I'm spreading it too. If you're reading this, if you drive long distances, if you use rest stops, be careful, pay attention, trust your instincts. And if someone offers you help that seems too convenient, too perfectly timed, ask yourself why they're really there. Because according to Frank, some people are always there. Watching, waiting, playing a game that no one else knows exists. And the winner is whoever can stay invisible the longest while racking up the highest score. This is the last story I'm going to share, and it's the one that makes me question everything I thought I knew about rest stops. It happened to me personally, just 6 months ago, and I still don't have a good explanation for it. I was driving from Chicago to Denver, a trip I'd made a dozen times before. It was late autumn, and I'd left early in the morning, planning to drive straight through. I'm one of those people who actually enjoys long solo drives. I find them meditative. Just me and the road and my thoughts for 16 hours. Everything was normal until I got into Nebraska. It was late afternoon, the sun was starting to set, and I realized I was getting hungry. I'd been driving for almost 10 hours and needed a break. When I saw a sign for a rest area in 5 miles, I decided to stop. The rest area wasn't marked on my GPS, which was strange. Usually they all are. But I figured maybe it was new or my maps were out of date. I took the exit. The road leading to the rest area was longer than normal. Most exits put you right at the facility, but this one wound through empty fields for at least a mile before I saw the building. When I finally arrived, the first thing I noticed was that the parking lot was completely full. Cars everywhere, dozens of them, all different makes and models, all parked neatly in the spaces. Which was weird because it was nearly sunset on a Thursday in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. Why would a random rest area be packed? I found a space at the far end of the lot and parked. As I walked toward the building, I started noticing things that felt off. The cars were all clean. Too clean, like they'd just been washed. And I couldn't see anyone inside any of them. No people sitting and resting. No kids in car seats. Just empty, pristine vehicles. The building itself looked normal enough. It was standard rest area architecture. Brick and glass, bathrooms on one side and vending machines on the other. But again, I didn't see anyone walking around. No travelers going in or out. No families at the picnic tables outside. I pushed through the entrance door and stopped. The interior was full of people. They were everywhere. Standing in the lobby area, leaning against walls, sitting on benches. At least 30 or 40 people, all completely silent, all facing the same direction, facing me. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet space. No one responded. They just stared. Men, women, different ages, different races, all with the same blank expression. Not hostile, not friendly. Just empty. I backed toward the door. "Sorry," I said. "Wrong place." As I reached for the handle, a woman's voice spoke from somewhere in the crowd. "You can't leave yet." "Why not?" I asked, not seeing who had spoken. "Because you just got here," the voice said. "Everyone has to stay for a while." I yanked the door open and ran to my car. My heart was pounding. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, grabbed them off the ground, and finally got my door open. I locked myself inside and started the engine. That's when I noticed the people. They were coming out of the building now, all of them, walking slowly toward the parking lot, spreading out among the cars, moving in that same slow, synchronized way, not running or hurrying, just walking, purposefully. I threw the car in reverse and backed out of the space. As I did, one of the people, an older man, stepped behind my car. I slammed on the brakes. He didn't move, just stood there, blocking my path, staring at me through my rear window. I honked. He didn't react. Other people were surrounding my car now, not touching it, not making threatening gestures, just standing around it in a circle, dozens of them, all staring at me with those empty faces. I made a decision. I put the car in drive, turned the wheel hard, and drove over the curb onto the grass. I bounced across the lawn area, around the circle of people, and back onto the pavement. Then I floored it toward the exit road. In my rear-view mirror, I could see all the people standing in the parking lot. Still silent, still watching, not following, but not leaving either. I drove back down that long, winding exit road as fast as I dared, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I finally reached the highway, I got back on heading west and didn't stop driving for another 3 hours, till even then, I only stopped at a well-lit gas station in a busy town, where I could see other normal people doing normal things. When I got to Denver, I looked up that rest area online. I searched using the approximate mile marker, tried to find it on satellite maps, looked for any reference to rest stops in that area of Nebraska. I found nothing. According to every map and website I checked, there is no rest area at that location. There's nothing there but empty farmland. I drove back through that same route 2 months later, in daylight this time. I wanted to see if I could find that rest area again. When I reached the approximate location, I watched carefully for the exit. There was no exit, no sign, just highway and fields and nothing else. I have no explanation for what I experienced. I wasn't tired. I'd only been driving for 10 hours, and I've driven longer without issue. I wasn't on any medication. I didn't have carbon monoxide exposure. I was fully alert and aware the entire time. But I know what I saw. That rest area existed. Those people existed. And I was there, in the middle of it, for at least 10 minutes. Sometimes I think about those people. Who were they? Were they real? Were they other travelers who'd made the mistake of stopping there and somehow gotten stuck? Or were they something else entirely? Something pretending to be travelers? And I think about all those cars in the parking lot. Clean, empty cars with no owners. Where did they come from? Are they still there, wherever there actually is? The scariest part is thinking about what might have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd used the bathroom or gotten food from a vending machine or just waited a few more minutes. Would I have ended up like them? Standing there with an empty expression, waiting for the next person to arrive? This is why I'm telling you these stories. This is why I wanted to share what I've experienced and what others have shared with me. Rest stops are strange places. Liminal spaces between where we're coming from and where we're going. Most of the time they're just boring buildings with bathrooms and vending machines, but sometimes, maybe more often than we'd like to think, there's something else. Something that exists in the spaces between normal reality. Places where people can disappear or get trapped or encounter things that shouldn't exist. I still use rest stops when I have to. I still take long road trips, but I'm more careful now. I pay attention to details. I trust my instincts. And if something feels wrong, if a rest area seems too empty or too full or just somehow off, I keep driving. I suggest you do the same. Some say these stories are just coincidences. Imagination running wild on lonely roads in the middle of the night. Maybe they're right. Maybe there's a logical explanation for every single experience I've shared, but I don't think so. And I don't think you do either, or you wouldn't have listened this long. So the next time you're driving late at night and you see that brown sign for a rest area appearing in your headlights, take a moment to think. Look at the parking lot as you pull in. Notice who's around. Pay attention to that feeling in your gut that tells you when something isn't right. And if you see anything like what I've described, anything that makes your instincts scream at you to leave, don't wait. Don't rationalize it. Just go. Because some rest stops aren't places where you stop to rest. They're places where you stop for good. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.